Howdy, and welcome to Curious Blend. I'm your host, Keller Davis, the owner of Createscape Coworking here in Austin, Texas. Curious Blend is a show where we explore the intersections between creativity, business, leadership, and philosophy. In each episode, I talk to inspiring guests who share their own unique stories and perspectives. I'm here to listen and to learn and to stay curious. And this is also the final episode of season 1 of Curious Blend. It's been so much fun to be doing this last couple months, and thank you so much to everyone who's been listening, sending me feedback and comments, and subscribing. It's really meant a lot to me, and I've loved the conversations that we've kind of started through this show, so thank you so much. And today's guest, I am just so freaking excited about because he's hands down one of my favorite people in the world, and I don't get enough time to see him nowadays because of work and life and craziness and all that. His name is Phillip Gazca, and he's a longtime friend since my early college days and an overall baller. Phil has over 14 years of experience in the real estate industry, and his resume speaks for itself. He's hired and trained over 350 agents and brokers, led multiple brokerages to billion-dollar valuations, and most recently, his team has closed over 250 real estate transactions in just 1 year. He's currently the sales manager at Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate Gary Green, as well as the executive director of his own real estate and investment firm. And so for some extra context, Phil and I go way back to our days at Texas A&M, where we met at the Aggie Swamp Club, SWAMP being an acronym for screenwriting, acting, and movie production. And beyond his hustle and expertise in real estate, I've always admired his strong work ethic, creativity, and ability to connect with others. I'm excited to chat with him about how his upbringing influenced his career, how he balances his creative side with the demands of real estate, and how he's become such a powerhouse in the industry. Phil, thank you for being on Curious Blend.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited and grateful to be here and excited to round out the group for season 1 because you've had a phenomenal group. Every episode I've been just watching and listening and just amazed by everybody you have out on here.
Oh, thank you.
I'm glad to be a part of this group.
Yeah, this is one of the first episodes we've been recording since we've actually started releasing episodes. So it's kind of interesting now that, we're past the point where it's like they're out in the universe.
Yeah, I had a little bit of time to watch everybody that's come before me so far, and I'm like, wow, these are some amazing people. I think I've texted you also. I'm like, wow, this is so cool. Some awesome people. So I'm excited to be here.
Yay. Leading up to this, I was also texting with our friend Lindsay because I kind of wanted to also get some ideas for types of things I should talk to you about. But where that led to was me wanting to ask you about your parents originally owning business and just the fact that can have such a huge influence on shaping a person's work ethic and perspective. I was in the same boat. My parents owned business when I was really young. And so I wanted to see if you can share how that experience impacted you and how it's shaped your approach to leadership in real estate.
So my parents did own a business. And even my grandfather had his own business also. So I come from a family of entrepreneurs. So it's kind of always been in my blood, and it's kind of, I've seen it grow up and kind of what it could do for your life, both the good and the bad. So I think it has a lot to do with the way that I approach business, the way that I lead, the agents that work with me, the way I lead my team, the way that I coach. It's really, really shaped my perspective on being a leader, because I have, again, growing up in it, I've seen the good and the bad. I think seeing my parents and everything that they put into growing a business, and it was all of my childhood years, my most formative years were spent around my parents building a business. And so it really, I got to see it and I was a part of it everywhere from the beginnings of the business to as it grew and grew. And from when I was a kid and my job was to go in there in the summer and shred paper or move things around to actually helping develop and grow the business right after college before I got into real estate. So it has been a big part of it. I think a lot of times, being completely honest, the way that my dad ran his business and the way that I run my business are completely different. And I think what I did is probably take a lot of the lessons in watching him interact with his team and his staff and going I don't really agree with that. And there is a lot of times where I'll go home and I'll talk to him about work, and he'll talk to me about work, and we very much do not see eye to eye in the way that we would like to run our own businesses. So I think part of it is probably a big part of it was just seeing the mistakes that they made and then building off of that.
Yeah, I've had similar things with my parents because like I feel like I've taken on so many of their own traits
Hmm.
myself, like as we all kind of do, but I also will pay really close attention to their behavior, and I try to think about like how I want to, pave my own way and do things differently and
Yeah.
kind of learn from their mistakes or whatever as
Yeah.
well, which I feel like is kind of, I don't know.
It's interesting because they always say we eventually become our parents. And as much as I think growing up and starting business, I was like, I'm going to do the complete opposite of that. There are times where I'll do something. I'm like, oh my God, that's my dad. That's 100% my dad. And now I get it. So I think that's also been something that's been really interesting to see, is because sometimes I'll do or say something and I'll think, oh my gosh, that's my dad. And that was one of the things that used to drive me crazy. So I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, instructions were not clear on my part, because I think that's been one of the big things is sometimes growing up, I would see my dad say something and to his staff or to me, and I'm like, the instructions were super unclear. Like, I'm not reading your mind. And now I do that sometimes. And I think as a leader, that is something that we have to stop back and look at and go, am I being very clear with my instructions and what I'm looking for? Or did I have it in my head and I expected them to understand what was in my head? So sometimes someone will do something and I know I'm like, I can't be upset, because if I think about what I told them, I didn't really give them the instructions that they needed, or I didn't give them the guidance they needed. So I always say, I'm so sorry. That was 100% on me. Um, let's take a step back and let's review what I said. Here's what I want, and here's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, it helps a lot to have that kind of self-awareness, and I don't know, not think that you're always just right off the bat. Like kind of be willing to learn and grow in
Yeah.
that. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've faced in like the last I would say 14 years of your career? I
Yeah.
mean, what were some of the like those experiences that kind of helped shape and define where you're at
Yeah.
now?
I think the first big one was early on in my career got to lead a group of agents. I was 25 years old when I first stepped into a management role.
I didn't
And
realize you were that young.
yeah, I was
This is at Keller
25.
Williams?
Yeah, this is at Keller Williams. And I was um, fresh into my career. I was 25 years old, and I was leading a group of agents some of who had been in business for 35 plus years. So way longer than I'd been alive. They'd been in business. And so one of the big things that I had to learn was how to jump into a situation and lead when you may not be completely ready to lead. And I think that's one of the things I think when it comes to leadership, you're never ready 100%. Like, you can't train for that. Sometimes you have to just jump right in, which is also part of my nature. It's like, let's jump in and we'll build the plane as we're falling out of the sky. But jumped in with a group of agents, and it was awesome what we did with that office, and the market share that we gained, and all the cool things that I learned. It really is what set me up for the trajectory that I eventually had in my career. It laid a great foundation, because it's not often that someone is 25 years old and gets to lead people that have been doing this job longer they've been alive.
Was there pushback from some of the people, like thinking
There's
like, "Oh, he did like who is he to
Yeah,
be instructing me?"
there's absolutely was pushback, and I think in stepping into new roles with new companies, I've had the cool opportunity to help launch multiple businesses and coach groups of people, and even now the current role that I'm in, I've only been there for about 8 months, and so stepping into a new situation as a leader is always a little bit of a challenge, because step one is um, re-recruiting the people that you have, and getting their buy-in, because I've seen, and in a couple of situations I've jumped right in and I'm like, all right, let's get to work, without ever trying to build the rapport with my own people, and that just makes it way more messier. So step one, I think, is getting in there and re-recruiting, loving on your people, getting the buy-in from them, because change is hard for anybody. Um, but when you're a leader, you have to be able to facilitate that change when you are the change, if you're stepping into that situation. So that's been a crazy ride every time I've stepped into a situation. And I'm like, all right, let's go, and getting the buy-in, and encouraging a group of people to work with you.
You're also known for thriving on like the hustle.
Yeah.
And so like what drives you to keep pushing for that kind of success? Like how do you maintain the momentum year after year? Cuz like you've had a lot of roles over the years.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm one of those people that I guess part of it is just I like to win. But I think part of it is I think I'm a fixer. If you'll talk to people that know me or my therapist maybe, the comment though is like Philip likes to get into the messy situations because that's where I thrive. I think chaos is like one of those places that I really love to play. And so moving into new situations and taking on new opportunities, especially when it's turning brokerages around or launching a brokerage from the ground up, like building any business is really, really crazy. Like you've done it before, like, and that's one of the things that we share, and that sometimes like in the growth process of building something, it's messy and it's crazy. And I think it takes a different type of person, someone who can remain calm, but someone who also likes the craziness. So that's been a big thing for me is as I've stepped into new roles, I'm like, okay. I think a lot of times I've told myself I work best when like everything's on fire and I see the clearest. It's almost like the Matrix when he slows down and all the bullets are flying and he's like doing that back bend. That's the way I feel a lot of times. I feel like when all the bullets are flying and when it's completely chaotic, I can really stop and slow down. And I think that's probably just the way that I'm wired. But I think that's a skill that a lot of leaders need to be able to develop, because I think that it is a skill that can be developed. But I think part of it is also naturally that's who I am. Building a business of any kind and scaling an organization is always going to be chaos and it's going to be messy. And that's where I think for me, I can step in and be like, all right, cool. Like, I'm not going to let all the craziness get in my way. I'm going to figure out like what's the very first thing that I need to be doing right now. Because I think that's the big part for a lot of business owners is it's always going to be chaos everywhere, most of the time, especially as you're scaling an organization. And being able to see through all of the chaos and pick the one thing that you need to be working on right now, and then move to the next thing is extremely important in those situations.
Yeah. How do you prioritize tasks? Like do you have your own process when it comes to this kind of thing? Like in terms of like what
Yeah.
like how you break down the value of like all these things you need to get done?
Yeah, I think it is really assessing all of the pieces at once and figuring out there are always going to be things that feel like they have to be a firefight immediately, but they're not. And I think that's also human instinct is to be like, oh my gosh, there's too many things at once and they're all equally important. But I think it is where it is a time where you need to take a step back, evaluate everything. And so I think a lot of this evaluation happens quick in my head. In some behavioral assessments, one of my higher aptitudes is like discernment. So being able to look at everything and go like, that's it right there. So I can't say that I'm an expert in all of that, but I can say, I think looking at it most of the time, like from that bigger, high up 30,000 foot view, is what you need to do and figure out like, okay, what can I push off a little bit and what can I get done right now? And it hasn't always worked out because I can say sometimes I'm like, that's what we need to be doing right now. And then that ends up making way more mess. But I think overall it is one of those things for figuring out, okay, what immediately affects the business right now, what immediately affects what we're doing in our mission. And I think that's probably part of it also is looking at mission. And I talk about mission a lot with people. What immediately affects the mission and filtering decisions, whether that gets us closer to or further from the mission.
Yeah. No, I really love that. I in terms of putting together a filter like that, I sometimes just have to put it all down on paper.
Yeah.
And then because it feels like overwhelming when it's all up in my head, like a million different things that I'm thinking I have to get done. But then I can kind of like assign, I don't know, even if it's just like priority level 1, 2, or 3, can then kind of like discern. I wish I could do it. I mean, it sounds like you can do it kind of on the fly quite a bit too, because you said, especially being discerning is such a strength.
Yeah. But I think you did say something really interesting just now, and it is getting it out of your head and onto paper. A lot of times over the years, I've always had like my right-hand man, usually someone who is more operations minded than I am.
Mm.
And I think that is part of it, is making sure that you've got the right team of people around you, making sure that you're building a team around you that plays to their strengths, that may help in places where you don't have that strength. So I think that's part of it. It's always a team collaborative effort, but going back to it, it is taking everything that's in your head and getting it out of your head is really, really important, because a lot of times the mental like distortion that happens can really affect what the outcome becomes. So like you said, putting it on paper, a lot of times people that work with me they know a lot of times I'll walk into the office and go, I just need to get everything out of my head and I need to hear it. So the words need to come out of my mouth and I need to hear it and reprocess it one more time. And so I'm like, you don't have to give me any feedback. You don't need it. I'm not looking for help. Just let me get everything out of my head for a second, and then it'll make sense to me. So I think that's the big thing, is I'm probably more of like an auditory person. And so speaking it and listening back to myself, I'm like, oh, that makes so much like more sense, or it's a little bit different now that I can hear it versus just thinking about it.
You talked about teams. Like, what is your rubric for putting together a good team?
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that I have spent a lot of my career learning about and researching, is team building. It's something I'm really passionate about. And I am such a nerd for behavior assessments. Anybody that has spent time around me in business knows that I'm always looking at behavior assessments, always looking at human behavior, which has become something that I'm extremely passionate about. I like to say that business has been, for me, it's been my laboratory to study human behavior. And I think that's why I like business.
I feel that way too.
Yeah. I'm so intrigued by the way humans operate and the way that brains work and the way that teams come together. So that has been where I've spent not most of my time, but a very large portion of my time learning about the human brain and learning about human interaction. So I think what's important is learning more about ourselves. So being self-aware. And I think that is something that I get a lot. It's like, you're very self-aware. And I'm like, well, as a leader, I think we should be self-aware, even if it's to know like, hey, I have a lot of faults. But that's where I'm going to build my organization around where my weaknesses are. And I think that whether it's real estate or co-working or building any business, I think figuring out who we are first is really, really important. And then figuring out where we want to go and who are the people that we need. And sometimes it's not people that we may not need them for a while, but knowing where do I want to go and who are the people that I'm going to have to add on the bus as we head in that direction.
I usually try to approach it as well as this thing of everyone just playing to their strengths and not trying to assign or give responsibilities or roles that just people are not suited best for.
It's super interesting because there are times where I have added people onto a team knowing that their natural behavior is not quite what fits the profile of what we're looking for, but it's something that they do truly want. And that is, I think that's an exercise in leadership, but I think that's also an exercise in helping them grow, which is it goes back to leadership, I guess, but helping others grow and develop where they want to, because they may not be that exact behavior type, but they know that's who I want to become. And I think that's a really cool thing. And seeing people grow and learn and become a much better version of theirself is one of the things that has kept me in leadership for all these years, because I would love to work by myself, but at the same time, I'm like, that's so boring. Because the part of leadership that, like I said, that my own little social experiment or my own little like laboratory to study human behavior, it's been over the 15 years of my career, and watching people have big successes in self-development is just such an amazing feeling. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why I've stayed in leadership, is because I love seeing those wins and I love seeing personal growth, not just for myself, but for others.
Yeah, no, that sounds so rewarding just on a personal level, in addition to just, I don't know, seeing those ripple effects in the work that you and the whole team are doing.
Yeah. And I always talk about the income that you can't pay the bills with. I share that a lot with people. I talk about the income that you can't pay the bills with, and what that is, kind of like filling a love tank.
Mm.
It is, I guess, even like climbing Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That's kind of the idea behind that. Is at some point, income is great when we have to pay our bills, and yes, we have our own like physical needs that we need. But as you climb that hierarchy of needs, then you can start filling that love tank, or that different bank account that is watching people succeed. And that's one where I'm like, I need to fill that tank also. And I think when I can fill that tank, um, I feel I feel fulfilled, but also get more out of the work that I do every single day.
You're also so good at networking in general, and it's something I've always like really admired in you is like your ability to build relationships with clients and agents or industry professionals or, friends. Like, I mean, how do you excel at connecting with people in that way? Like, how does that
Yeah.
contribute to your success?
Yeah. I mean, I think being a leader, obviously, or a business owner or a creative at any point, or at some point, we're going to have to network. And I think people look at it as like a task. And I can tell you a lot of times I look at it as a task too. I don't, whenever I feel like I have to be networking, I'm like, oh gosh, it really kind of like eats my soul a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But multiple people have asked me that question over the years, like how you're very good at doing that. And so I don't think I've ever looked at it as networking, but
You're also just a people person.
yeah,
in
I
general.
really love people, but I think you can also get good at it. And the simple formula that I give people when it comes to networking or building a group of people or building a friend group, whatever it is I always say, show up in the same place at the same time with the same energy.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're genuinely yourself and you're showing up in the same places, you're going to start to attract the like-minded people, or you're going to, oftentimes, like for me, it's attracting people who are very different from me. But I think that goes back to also being self-aware. Who am I, and what is the energy that I'm putting out there?
Mm-hmm.
Because either the right people will come into your world, or the people that are different but complementary will come into your world.
How do you balance your personal life with your professional responsibilities? What's your kind of secret formula to
Yeah.
having all that?
I heard early on in my career that a balanced life is a myth. Like it's never going to be a balanced life. And it was such an eye-opening experience for me in hearing that and kind of working that into my life, is that we hear work-life balance all the time. And that's
Yeah.
kind of been this running thing forever. It's like, oh, I'm spending too much time at work. I got to balance it out. Um, we have to look at it as counterbalance. We have to look at it as a pendulum. Like there are going to be times where we are spending more time in work,
Yeah.
and there are going to be more times that we're spending time in our own personal lives, and that's okay. And I think that's the first part of it, is getting okay with understanding that there's no such thing as a balanced life.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be imbalanced at time, and the goal is to manage it where it's like the swing is not so far, because I think that's where people burn out, or that's where we have issues our careers, if we're swinging drastically from all the personal time to all the business time. But I think interlacing work and business, I think is something that is very doable. And I think we just if you look at it that way and know, like, I know that sometimes I'm going to be answering questions on the weekend or in the middle of the night, or that's just the nature of being a business owner.
Mm-hmm.
So I've accepted that, but again, I know that the trade-off is going to be, hey, there are going to be some times during a normal workday where I've got to do some personal things too. So I think that's it, is one, just accepting the fact that life will never truly be balanced. If you're a leader, if you're a business owner, any of those things, you're never going to have a truly balanced life. You can work to kind of minimize the swing back and forth. And I think it really comes down to the mindset around that.
Do you build your own schedule? Is
At this point, I'm a little bit more tied to the office, because leading the team that I lead right now, typically most of what they do is during the workday, and so
Yeah.
training and getting them ready, spend a lot of time during the workday, and so the workday is mostly the same now. The after hours times that's where again the swing happens.
I see.
And so I'll typically again balance it out. Like today's a perfect example. I've been running and gunning like nonstop for the last 2 weeks. And I'm like, okay, I want to take some time to go talk with Keller because this is something I'm passionate about.
Yeah. No, well, and I'm glad that you came in from Houston for this too.
Yeah.
One other thing that I always think of when I describe you to other people is how like positive you are and how confident you are and how it's like really infectious and it's like an energy that just makes everyone around you feel really empowered as well. How is it when you have dealt with like either like self-doubt or anxiety or anything else like that in
Yeah.
like professional settings?
I think that's a big one. And yes, I always say that one of my superpowers is being able to encourage people, make them feel empowered. And it's something that, again, that going back to filling that love tank, like
Mhm.
I think that love tank for me is just so big. I got to spend a lot of time pouring out into others. But yeah, anxiety and self doubt is something that I deal with every single day. And sometimes people are like, you're just always in a good mood. And I'm like, I can tell you in my head that I'm not in a good mood. I think, um, one thing that I learned early on in my career, especially as a leader, is that leaders can't, it's hard as a leader to have a bad day because our energy, I had an old mentor that said, we have to think of our energy like a laser beam that goes in front of us and behind us. Our team and the people that we work with are going to feel it before we get there, and they're going to feel it after we leave. And so I think for me, it's being very cognizant of what's the energy that I'm going to leave, what's the energy that gets to the room before I get there, and what's the energy that stays in the room when I leave. And I've seen leaders before. I call it seagull leadership. They come in, they dump on everybody, and they fly back out. And now everyone's left to clean up the mess. And that's one thing that I truly don't want to do. And so it is something where you have to stop and think about it first. Like whenever I'm in a bad mood, like I can guarantee if I'm in a bad mood and I don't control myself, everyone's going to feel it. Like
Yeah.
everyone, like it will change the energy of the room or it'll change the energy of the group of people that I'm with. And I see it happen sometimes and I'm like, oh, I feel so bad about that. So I think being aware of it is really important. It is okay to have a bad day. One thing that I tell people all the time is like a bad day's fine. If you're having a bad day, like pull yourself out of the situation. Uh, don't try to get people to commiserate with you because I think that's the other thing
Mm.
when it comes to that is a lot of times we're not in a good mood and we're like we want everybody else to come down to that level with us and just
Yeah.
commiserate with us. So I think we have to be aware of that and go, all right, no, if I'm in a bad mood, like I got to separate myself from everybody, but because it's all right if you have a bad day and you might even have a bad week. That's okay too. But if it goes past that, like that's a decision that we are making ourselves. Um, I always say suffering is really what's happening up here between our ears. It's in our own head. Like if we're suffering, a lot of times we can take ourselves out of that suffering. It takes some practice.
Mm-hmm.
It really does take practice to bounce back quicker. But suffering is something that just happens mainly in our head. It's caused by external stimuli. But I think great leaders can take that and I'm not even gonna say compartmentalize because that's like that means you're packaging it and storing it away for later. But
Mm-hmm.
they can take that and understand like, hey, you know what, this is what's making me feel anxious. This is what's making me feel upset and say, okay, I get it. That's like, and I tell my people this all the time. I'm like, you are a human having a human experience, and that's okay. Like, it's okay to feel bad. It's okay to have any of these negative emotions. That's it. That's just what being a human is. Sometimes you're having a human experience.
Yeah.
Have the human experience, but understand how it affects you and understand how it affects others. So I think that's how I handle that is understanding that, yes, I'm having a human experience. Like it is caused by external stimuli. It could be caused by my own thoughts, but I need to understand that and I need to deal with it. And I need to make sure that that doesn't affect the people around me.
Right. Yeah. No, that's so interesting. I mean, yeah, you have a responsibility, especially when you're around other people, to be aware of like the energy that you're having or putting out there and how it's affecting other people. Like especially because I work with many other people, I've gotten into a habit in the last year where I'm waking up early and meditating, even if it's just
Yeah.
for like 3 minutes. Because the days that I don't do that consistently, it's like I can tell I'm a little bit more off balance,
Yeah.
and so I'm like I have to find ways to just center myself so that I can, I don't know, exist from a place of intentionality, and I'm not just being like reactive to yeah, like a bad mood or a bad day or something
Yeah.
like that that's going on.
That's such a great point. Self-care and being able to like manage our own emotions is really important. It takes practice. Figuring out the things like waking up early. For me, sometimes it's just like having the amount of water that I need to have, like
Yes,
not being
water.
dehydrated. But I'll stop people a lot of times throughout the day if they come into my office with that bad energy. Also, I'm like, all right, let's stop for a second. I'm like, you're good. Let's breathe. I want us to take 3 deep breaths. And at the beginning of my career, I was one of those people that I'm like, get all that woo-woo stuff out of here.
Yeah,
Like, I
I
don't
used
want
to
any of
doubt
that.
it.
I used to doubt it also. Affirmations, all of that kind of stuff. But the more that I learned about the human brain, um, again, even like resetting our parasympathetic nervous system through the breathing, affirmations being a way to reprogram our brain and creating these neural pathways that help us be more likely to think in a positive way. Those are all things that are really, really important.
When we were in college and I was roommates with you for I think maybe a year, maybe it was a little bit longer than a
Yeah.
year. That was when I was also the president of Swamp, and but really just living in the same house and environment as you, I feel like I've told people before, that was one of the like happiest years of my life because it really just the energy that you brought, it just rubbed off on me, and it just kind of it always made me feel like, I don't know, I see how you've done that with teams as well over the years because and to me it just makes perfect sense. I'm like, oh, I know Phil.
Yeah.
With high pressure situations, is there anything else that I'm missing when it comes to how you approach that?
Both you and I have been scaling businesses for the last basically over a decade. And so I'm sure that you and I have been in a lot of high pressure situations.
Mhm.
I think one of the things that works for me is getting into action as quickly as possible.
Mm.
I know that I'm a let's jump and do it kind of person, and I think that's worked for me. Where I see high pressure situations derail organizations, derail teams is when they stop to really, really analyze it. I think maybe some of my success has come in not thinking too deep about things. Um, Again, could that be a bad thing? Probably. But I think for me personally, getting into action as quickly as possible is always the thing.
Yeah,
And
people can overthink something
Mhm.
too without any action.
yeah, and I think that that's a big thing. And for me, I'm a lot of behavior assessments always say that I'm a starter. Like I'm like, let's not think about it. Let's just do. So I think that that's encouragement that I give to people is like, hey, don't think too much about it. Like, what's the first? I guess the question that I ask people all the time is like, what's the next right decision that you need to make?
Yeah.
And sometimes people think like, well, I got to do this, 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 and it's like, no. What's the next? Like, what's the very next? Like, not what's the laundry list of right decisions that you need to make, but what's the next right decision that you need to make? And I think that's probably in dealing with high pressure situations, the way that I look at it is I'm not looking 10 steps ahead. I'm just like, what's the next thing that I need to handle?
Is some of this philosophy also from the Keller Williams book or one?
Not
Or
necessarily.
no?
I think
Okay.
I've had just some amazing mentors over the
Yeah.
years. Truly, I think a lot of my success, and I'd say most of my success,
Due to
has to
mentors?
do with just mentors
Wow.
that are big thinkers and mentors that this is the thing that I think of now and I think of all the time as I'm building an organization is the mentors and the people that I've worked for in the past always said one consistent thing. I need to build a world big enough such that everyone else's big world fits inside of it.
Mm.
And that's what I think about all the time. Is my world big enough that my team's worlds fit inside of it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it just forces us as leaders to become better or grow or think bigger. Even like as you were talking about with Createscape here, like taking on all the additional square footage and all like again launching new rooms and everything. Your world has to get bigger because the people that you have in your world, their worlds are continuing to grow.
Yeah.
And I think it's such an interesting thought that if my world's not getting bigger, then the people that are in my orbit and the people that are in the orbit of those people, their world's not getting bigger.
How do you find mentors? Like, I mean, where have the mentors in your life, the most important ones, really come from? And was it more formal or more casual? Like, what was that dynamic like?
I've had some formal and I've had some casual. Some have just come up as friendships. I've got a couple of great friends that I look to, probably that I speak to every single day, who have helped me make a lot of the decisions, mainly because they don't think the same way that I do. So having a perspective. And so I think if we're looking for mentors, one, finding the people that think like you and then are a couple of steps ahead, and then having the people that don't think like you, and are a couple steps ahead. Because I think that's where the biggest growth for me has happened, is seeing people that think like me and then following in their footsteps and asking them how they got there, but also seeing the people that don't think like me
Mm-hmm.
and understanding that, hey, maybe they don't think like me, but they took some steps in the right direction. So formal and informal, I think you probably need a mix of both. And I think it's just doing some research, and that's the hard part, doing the research to figure out like who is a couple steps ahead of me, who's just 2 steps ahead of me,
Mm-hmm.
who's 1 step ahead of me, and then building relationships with those people.
I wish that there was like, I mean, maybe this exists, but I wish that there was like some kind of like, almost like a dating app, but just for finding mentors.
Yeah.
Like,
No, that you might just that might be the next $1 million idea right there. But yeah, no, I think it is. I think I want to say a lot of mine was luck. And I think also I think maybe the first couple of steps were luck. I just met some people and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is someone I want to learn from. I think the internet had to do a lot with that. Early on in my career, like social media as like a business tool wasn't really a thing, which is crazy to say. It was like on the forefront, but I think I started spending time on Facebook. It was really Facebook and Facebook groups at that time, meeting people. And that's where I kind of discovered my passion for understanding behavior, because there were some groups of leaders that they were talking about the DISC assessment, which was like
oh,
the
yeah.
DISC I always say is a gateway behavior assessment till you learn it and you're like, cool. And then I'm like, well, I want to learn more. But I think that's how it started, was just going online and finding these other people that were talking about things that I was interested in.
And you've also been diving into the psychology of fear recently.
Yeah. Every year I try to pick a topic that's relevant to business owners, to my team. And recently I was talking to an agent and I was just checking in, someone who I used to coach. And she shared with me, she said, I've been doing this for a while. I know what I'm doing. I know what I need to do. And she's like, I just don't know why. I'm like, I'm scared to do it. I'm scared to succeed. I'm scared to do like the prospecting that I need to do. Like, I'm just generally scared. And I thought, okay, well, there's my research project for the year. I assign myself a research project every year.
That's good.
And I'm like, that's it. I'm going to learn about fear. It gives me also the opportunity to take what I'm learning and then give it back to the people that I'm working with. So, in understanding fear, a lot of it's just the way that our brain is wired. Like, we have evolved over the years. And I tell people all the time, like, let's go back to caveman days. If you were stressed, it was probably a life or death situation.
Yeah.
If you're stressed, you're like, oh, I'm about to fall off a cliff, or that's a saber-toothed tiger that's about to attack me. So the brain was evolved and wired to think stress is going to stress of any kind equals potential life or death situation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the response that our body's having, and that's the response that our brain's having. Now, we have to understand that most of the stress that we deal with day to day is not a life or death situation.
Yeah, not everything's fight or flight.
Exactly. But that's what our body wants to do naturally. And so I tell everybody, that's where we need to start and figure it out and just say, like, okay, is this truly a life or death situation? Or am I just having a human experience again? Going back to what I was talking about earlier, am I just having a human experience? And that's it. We're just having a human experience. So I think being self-aware and thinking about that is important. But again, in going back to researching the science of fear, the psychology of fear, like what's going on in our brains, it's been really interesting to be able to share that with people and go like, hey, like, I know that you, like, just telling them you're having that human experience and that your body thinks it's fight or flight and you might die, but you're not going to die. And I think just rationalizing that. And so that's where I'm at right now. And I'm going to start packaging that more and sharing that with the people that I coach and with other people, because I think it's really interesting. And I think as business owners, as um, creatives, as leaders, again, a lot of times it is the fear that can hold us back. And um, a lot of times someone just has to help us rationalize that. And I think that's one of my new like marching orders, and like my calling is to help people figure that out, so that they can become better.
Yeah. I love that. I took I think it was a couple months ago, I took a sheet of paper out and I just for I don't know what was or what got into me, but decided just to write out every single fear I have in life.
Yeah.
And it was sometimes it was just stupid things like a cold shower or
Yeah.
or calling a business on the phone and asking them a question or something. Just little things like that, but I then tried to take so many of those things on that list and say, "Oh, I'm gonna start just trying to incorporate this into my daily life and then like push myself towards doing those uncomfortable
Yeah.
things like that I'm afraid of and try to work through some of the fear of these things just to take the power away from it."
Yeah. That's one way to handle fears, is just like exposure therapy,
Yeah,
basically, is
that's
what it is. And if your brain just gets exposed to it more, you're kind of desensitized to it. So I think
Mhm.
that is a big one. When I'm talking to my own agents, I'm like, if that phone can feel like it's 30 pounds sometimes. I think about the first couple of calls that I ever made. Even now, as I'm growing my organization and growing my team, it's like calling people, and sometimes the phone does feel heavy.
Mhm.
But what I'm telling my people right now is like, you just got to get some more at bats. Like, keep doing it, and before you know it, it won't be as scary as it is. So, yeah, exposure therapy is it helps. It helps train the brain. And but I love what you did, and just writing it down, and sometimes even just seeing, again, going back to putting things on paper, getting them out of your brain. It looks so much different when it's not in your brain.
I realized, especially around the time of the pandemic, that I was like kind of responding to fear more than I wanted to be, and kind of just like I was afraid of kind of just like the uncertainty of a lot of stuff.
Hmm.
And I've since then tried to evaluate that and work through a lot of those issues so that I can uh, just be more intentional with the decisions I actually want to make.
Yeah.
How do you make like really hard decisions when you're faced with them?
Yeah, that's a good one. So making hard decisions, I think everything goes back to just our mindset around it.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you start with the mindset of like, I'm gonna have to make hard decisions, that's part of my job.
Yeah.
That is part of what I've chosen to do. I think that's the very first step, because I think a lot of times people will go like, oh, that's like, they'll be presented with a tough decision,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, that's not my job. Like, I didn't sign up for this.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I've said that too. I'm like, I didn't sign up for that. And then I have to stop myself. I'm like, I mean, as a leader, yes, I did sign up for that. And I
Yeah.
signed up for that and more. Um,
Everything can kind of eventually come back to you, I guess,
yeah,
when you're in a leadership position.
exactly. And so, yeah, one, just thinking like, all right, this is what I signed up for. This is just the byproduct of what I'm doing. And then I think being able to look at it from a different perspective, and again, whether it's putting it on paper, getting it out of your head, um, being able to do that. And then I think what I'd say at that point is just making a decision. It sounds super simple, but making a decision and working through anything that may come up from that. Because I
Mm-hmm.
think we get bogged down in making the right decision,
Mm-hmm.
that I think sometimes that's the wrong decision. Is trying to figure out what is the right decision. But I think the step is making a decision, and then dealing with, again, going back to what's next right thing that I need to do, making a decision, and then figuring out like, maybe again, I've made a lot of wrong decisions, or decisions that were not the best, and then having to fix them as we go on. Um, and I think that is going back to being a leader. We don't have the luxury of not making decisions.
Yeah.
And so you just have to make it, and then be able to, hopefully you've thought through that decision, and it's not just a wild
Right.
decision that you've made, but thinking through it, and then committing to it, and then working through whatever comes as a result of it.
Yeah. I mean, even if it's like a gut decision, it's still kind of based in it is filtered through your own set of values and
Yeah.
your own kind of criteria at the back of your mind. So, yeah, as long as you're kind of putting thought into it,
Yeah.
you know.
I tell my people this all the time. You can't control your first thought, but you can control your second thought. Our brains are a filing cabinet of all the experiences and everything that's ever happened to us and all the thoughts that we have. And it's like a computer. If you give it a stimuli, it's going to go and it's going to open up that file in that cabinet immediately. I always joke that whatever my natural instinct is to do, I'm going to do the opposite of that. Because it makes me stop and think about it. But I do know, again, and I probably tell myself this every single day, but if you're in my orbit, you hear this from me. You can't control your first thought, but you can control your second thought. And so I think that forces me to figure out what's that gut reaction that I had and process that and then say, is this the right thing or do I need to do something different?
I'm totally going to use the second thought mentality.
It is. And like I said, I always joke that I do the exact opposite of what my natural instinct is to do, because normally my natural instinct is wrong. But it is, again, just it helps me think a little bit. Even if it's like 2 more seconds that I'm going to think about it, it helps me not just react instinctually.
I've seen your own creativity shine through over the years, especially since like in Swamp when we were making movies and things like that. You know, I was wondering, like, how does your creative side come out in how you train and how you lead or how you like even do marketing?
Yeah. Yeah, I like to think that I really balance the creative side of my brain with like the operational, like systems side of my brain. And I think that also is like a counterbalancing act that I do. I feel like if I spend too much time just being like robotic and doing like the systems operations type of thing, like I call it accounting brain, like the accountant brain,
Yeah.
that I do need to swing to the other side and spend some time doing creative things. But I like to find the times in my day and in the business where I can merge the two. And I think problem solving is one of those things that's both an art and a science.
Yeah.
So that's why I like in the fast paced like world of real estate, there's always like no 2 deals have ever been the same. And sometimes agents will come to me with a situation. I'm like, wow, I have never seen that one before. And so I think one of the ways that I can flex the creative side of my brain is through creative problem solving, and looking at it from through a different lens. But also I think we got to do some creative things. Like, I think it's a Benjamin Franklin quote that I'm about to butcher. So please forgive me if anybody's he sees or hears this and they're like, that's so wrong. I think he said something to the effect of creativity is intelligence having fun. I might have gotten that right. If I got that right, I'm going to be really happy.
I've heard that before.
Yeah. So creativity is intelligence having fun. And so sometimes finding things to do that are creative. Like if you follow me on social media, you'll see like I create reels all the time because that's one of my creative outlets. I like to do artistic things, paint and all that kind of stuff, because I do think that having that creative outlet is really, really important. And I think it helps us open up other parts of our brain that if we're stuck kind of in the wheel of the normal things that we do in our job, finding ways to be creative, finding ways to flex the other side of our brain, even if we're not naturally creatives. I think if we spend some time working that creative part of our brain, like the other side of our brain, 1, gets a chance to take a rest, but 2, then like now your world starts to look a little bit different.
Yeah, because really it's like anytime that there's a constraint with something or a problem to solve, thinking of all the different possibilities and ways that you can solve it is a form of creativity, because it's like other expressions of creativity help kind of your mind to get into a flow that is about finding that other pathway or finding that other way to get from point A to point B.
Training your brain to just operate a little bit differently. And I walked into the little convenience store right across from where I live, and they had this stack of adult coloring books and like markers and stuff. And I was like, I need to grab one of these. But as we're talking about this, I'm thinking like, oh, that's probably part of it. I know it's like stress relief and like self-care, mental, like being able to come down and like get out of the craziness of the world. But I think as we talk about this, I'm thinking like that is being able to flex that creative side of your brain to help reprogram your brain and to de-stress. And hopefully for those people that aren't completely creative minded, like it's helping open up this other world for them. So
Yeah, we do
it's a cool
we do
thought.
those kind of events at Createscape like once every month or two as well, just for kind of like a break from work, but also as a way to it is kind of like a practice of getting out of your head a little bit and into a little bit more of a creative mindset. So.
Yeah, I think I just found my next research topic and just working the creative side of your brain and how that can help us just get better. Again, self-development obviously is one of the big things I've been focused on in my career, but
Yeah.
I think that's a good next research project for me.
Yeah.
Creativity.
No, I love that. So like I've been in this book club where we've been reading The Artist's Way.
Oh yeah.
And so it's a very, very dense book of things to do. It's kind of like almost like a course.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of little lessons in it that also help in all different aspects of your life, in terms of just the creative mindset and kind of developing and honing those kind of creative skills. So
Yeah.
it's definitely worth looking into.
That's cool. Yeah, I've heard a lot about it, and I remember when you started reading it, I saw it on social media somewhere that
Oh,
you were
yeah.
reading, I think, and I thought, oh, maybe it's time to. Actually, I may have sent you something funny about it. I'm pretty sure I did, but yeah, I might look into that because I'm thinking that one of the ways to break the monotony of life and one of the ways to be able to just feel a little bit different and be a little bit different and grow, I think it is through flexing the creative side of our brain.
Well, thank you for all the support that you've kind of given Createscape over the years, given me over the years. It's I always feel like every conversation I've ever really had with you, I like take something away from it. I learn something from it. So
Yeah.
It's been so awesome to have you on this podcast, and it's been a great way to like wrap up this first season. It's really meant a lot to me.
Well, yeah, thank you for having me. Congratulations on the success of Createscape and everything that you're doing. It's been awesome to watch. Again, 10 years, right?
10 years. Yeah.
It's been awesome to watch for the last 10 years. So thank you.
Everyone who's been watching, everyone who's been listening this whole season long, thank you again. And make sure to like us on Instagram, and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And then you can stay up to date with everything Curious Blend. Again, I'm your host, Keller Davis. And until next time, stay curious.